The gold light of dawn spilled over Vermilion Creek as Vivian Zimmerman stood trembling on the auction block, her honey blonde hair catching the early morning sun despite the layer of trail dust that dulled its shine. Wyoming Territory, 1871, a harsh time to be a woman without protection, especially one whose father had died on the journey west, leaving nothing but debts and broken promises. "Next up, gentlemen," the auctioneer bellowed, his voice carrying across the dusty square where 30 men had gathered, most nursing whiskey despite the early hour. "Miss Vivian Zimmerman, age 20, can cook, clean, and sew like her mama taught her. Reads and writes too, if that matters to any of you." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Starting bid to cover her late father's debts, $50. Vivian bit her lip hard enough to taste blood, forcing back tears. She refused to cry in front of these men. The bride auction had been her only option after the banker seized everything but the dress on her back and the small carpet bag at her feet. It was this or the brothel, and she'd made her choice. "55, called a grizzled miner with tobacco-stained teeth. "60, countered a rancher old enough to be her grandfather. As the bidding continued, Vivian kept her eyes fixed on the distant mountains, praying for deliverance while knowing God had abandoned her somewhere east of the Mississippi. At the back of the crowd, Lucas Reed leaned against a hitching post, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his worn cavalry hat. His clothes were clean but threadbare dusty boots, faded denim pants, and a cotton shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbow revealing forearms corded with muscle from years of ranch work. Unlike the others, he nursed no whiskey, just observed with clear, assessing eyes. The bidding reached $90 when the town's saloon owner, Harlan Tucker, stepped forward. "100, he announced with a smirk that made Vivian's skin crawl. Everyone knew Tucker didn't need a wife. He wanted another girl for his establishment. "Going once for Mr. Tucker at $100, the auctioneer called, scanning the crowd. "120, a new voice called from the back. Heads turned to see Lucas straightening from his post, his expression still calm despite the murmurs his bid caused. Tucker's face reddened. "130. Lucas walked slowly forward, his spurs making a soft, jingling sound with each deliberate step. "150, Tucker glared. "You ain't got that kind of money, Reed." Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch, emptying its contents into his palm gold coins catching the sunlight. $152, he said quietly. "Every cent I have." The auctioneer looked between the two men. Tucker hesitated, calculating the profit against the trouble of outbidding the well-respected rancher. Finally, he shrugged and stepped back. "Sold," the auctioneer declared, "to Mr. Lucas Reed for $152. Vivian's heart hammered in her chest as Lucas approached the platform. He didn't look at her immediately, instead counting the coins into the auctioneer's palm. Only when the transaction was complete did he turn to her, his eyes a startling blue against his sun-browned face. "Miss Zimmerman," he said quietly, offering his hand to help her down. "I'm Lucas Reed." Vivian placed her trembling fingers in his calloused palm. "Why?" she whispered. His expression remained neutral as he retrieved her carpet bag. "Not here," was all he said before leading her toward a wagon hitched at the edge of town. The curious townsfolk watched as Lucas helped Vivian onto the wagon seat. She sat rigidly, uncertain of her fate, but relieved to be away from Tucker's predatory gaze. They traveled in silence until the town disappeared behind them. Only then did Lucas speak. "My ranch is about 5 miles ahead. It's not much a cabin, barn, and 100 acres with 30 head of cattle." "And what do you expect of me, Mr. Reed?" Vivian asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Lucas kept his eyes on the trail. "I need help with the ranch, cooking, mending, tending the garden." He paused. "Nothing more than you're willing to give." Vivian studied his profile, the straight nose, firm jaw shadowed with stubble, lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of squinting into the sun. He wasn't handsome in the conventional way, but there was something solid about him that she found reassuring. "That was all your money, wasn't it?" she asked quietly, his hands tightened on the reins. "I've been saving to buy breeding stock. The ranch needs expansion if it's going to survive another winter." "Then why spend it on me?" Lucas finally turned to look at her, his expression softening slightly. "Tucker doesn't buy wives, Miss Zimmerman." Understanding dawned, and with it, gratitude that brought fresh tears to her eyes. This time she didn't fight them. "Thank you," she whispered. Lucas nodded once, then returned his attention to the road. "We'll figure the rest out as we go." The rest of the journey passed in contemplative silence. When they crested a small rise, Lucas pointed ahead. "There it is." Reed Ranch was modest but well-kept, a two-room cabin with a front porch, a sturdy barn, corral, and chicken coop. A creek bordered one side of the property with cottonwoods providing welcome shade. Beyond stretched grassland dotted with cattle. "It's lovely," Vivian said honestly. Lucas's expression revealed surprise before he masked it. "It's a hard life out here." "I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Reed." He helped her down from the wagon. "Lucas, if we're to live together, you might as well use my given name." Vivian nodded, gathering her courage. "What are we to each other, then? I understand there will be no marital relations, but what will people think?" Lucas considered this as he unhitched the horses. "People will assume what they want regardless of what we tell them. For now, you're my housekeeper if anyone asks. And where will I sleep? The cabin has 2 rooms. One's mine, the other's yours." Relief washed through her. "Thank you, Lucas." He nodded again, then gestured toward the cabin. "Go on in and get settled. I need to tend to the horses." The cabin was simple but clean, with hand-hewn furniture and braided rugs on the plank floors. The main room served as kitchen and living area with a stone fireplace. 2 doors led to separate bedrooms, as promised. Vivian found the smaller room contained a narrow bed with a quilt, a washstand, and a chest for clothing. She sat on the bed, finally allowing herself to process the day's events. She'd been prepared to become some man's wife, hopefully a decent one, though she'd had no guarantees. Instead, she found herself the housekeeper to a quiet rancher who'd spent his last penny to save her from a brothel. The contradiction of it all overwhelmed her, and for the first time since her father's death, Vivian let herself weep freely. She was still composing herself when Lucas knocked on the doorframe. He averted his eyes from her tear-stained face. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, setting a plate of bread and cheese on the chest. "It's not much, but it'll tide you over until supper." "You cook?" "Had to learn. Been on my own since the war ended." Vivian wiped her eyes. "Which side?" "Union, cavalry." He hesitated. "Got a letter 2 years ago that my parents had died of influenza back in Pennsylvania while I was fighting. Came west after mustering out, used my pay to start this place." "I'm sorry about your parents," he shrugged. "Yours?" "Mother died when I was 15. Father dragged me west chasing mining prospects, drank and gambled away what little we had. Caught pneumonia and died 3 weeks ago in the room above the saloon." Lucas nodded, absorbing this information. "Rest now if you need. Kitchen supplies are in the cupboards if you want to cook later." "Otherwise, I can manage." "I'll cook," she said quickly. "It's the least I can do." After he left, Vivian ate the simple meal, surprised by how hungry she was. Then she unpacked her meager belongings: 2 dresses, undergarments, a hairbrush, and her mother's Bible. Last, she removed a small locket containing miniature portraits of her parents from happier times. That evening, Vivian prepared a simple stew with vegetables from the garden and salt pork. Lucas ate silently, but nodded appreciation at the improvement over his own cooking. Their conversation remained practical, discussing the garden, chickens, and household needs. When darkness fell, they retired to their separate rooms with polite goodnights. Vivian lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the night sounds: crickets, an occasional coyote call, the soft lowing of cattle. Her situation was strange, unprecedented even, but for the first time since her father's death, she felt safe. The following weeks established a rhythm to their unusual arrangement. Vivian took over the domestic duties, finding satisfaction in creating order and comfort in the small cabin. She discovered Lucas was meticulously organized with his ranching ledgers but hopeless with household matters. He worked from dawn until dusk, returning exhausted but always thanking her for meals and clean clothes. One evening, as summer transitioned to fall, Lucas returned earlier than usual, carrying something wrapped in burlap. "Caught a mess of trout," he explained, unveiling 5 gleaming fish. "Thought they might make a nice change," Vivian smiled. "They certainly will. I'll prepare them right away." As she cleaned the fish at the outdoor pump, Lucas hesitated nearby, watching her work with evident approval. "You've settled in well," he finally said. "It's been easy to do so." "You've been very kind." He looked uncomfortable with the compliment. "Needed the help anyway," he muttered. "Even so, you could have had it without spending your last cent." She glanced up at him. "Your breeding stock money." Lucas leaned against the pump, crossing his arms. "Couldn't let Tucker have you. Many men would have just looked away." "I'm not many men," he said simply. Something in his tone made Vivian pause her work to study him. In the weeks they'd lived together, she'd learned he was a man of few words but consistent actions. He never complained about the long hours or backbreaking work. He treated his animals with gentle firmness and, though reserved, had shown her nothing but respect. "No," she agreed softly. "You certainly are not." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary before Lucas cleared his throat. "I'll split some more firewood before supper." That night, Vivian found herself unable to sleep, thinking about the man in the next room. She'd come to admire his quiet strength and steadfast character. But more concerning was the flutter in her stomach when their hands accidentally touched, or when she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. This wasn't part of their arrangement, these growing feelings. He'd made it clear they were housekeeper and rancher, nothing more. She resolved to guard her heart more carefully. October brought the first frost and preparations for winter. They worked side by side, harvesting the last vegetables, smoking meat, and sealing the cabin against coming storms. Lucas had grown more talkative as the weeks passed, occasionally sharing stories of his childhood in Pennsylvania or his time in the cavalry. One evening, as the first snowflakes began to fall, he brought out a fiddle Vivian hadn't known he possessed. "You play?" she asked, delighted. He ducked his head almost shyly. "Not well. Learned from my grandfather. Haven't played much since the war." "Would you play something now?" Lucas hesitated, then tucked the instrument under his chin. After a moment's adjustment, he began a lilting melody that filled the cabin with warm sound. Vivian watched his face transform as he played, the usual tension easing from his features. When he finished, she applauded. "That was beautiful." "My mother's favorite," he said, setting the fiddle aside. "She used to say music keeps the soul from freezing even in the coldest winter." "She sounds wise." She was. He stared into the fire. "Would have liked you." The simple statement warmed Vivian more than the flames. "I would have liked to meet her." Winter descended in earnest, trapping them in the cabin for days at a time while blizzards raged. They fell into new routines, Lucas reading aloud from his small collection of books while Vivian mended clothes, or both of them playing checkers with a set he'd carved himself. The enforced proximity should have been uncomfortable, but instead, Vivian found herself enjoying his company more each day. During a particularly fierce storm in December, they sat before the fire drinking coffee, listening to the wind howl outside. "Do you ever regret it?" Vivian asked suddenly. "Spending your money on me instead of cattle?" Lucas considered the question, turning his cup in his hands. "No," he finally answered. "The ranch is surviving, we'll manage, but you could have expanded, made things more secure." "Some things matter more than security." He met her gaze steadily. "I don't regret it, Vivian." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it sent a ripple of warmth through her. "I'm glad," she whispered, "because I've never been happier than I am here." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight parting of lips as if words hovered there, unspoken. But the moment passed when a particularly strong gust rattled the windows, drawing his attention away. The next morning, Vivian woke to find Lucas already gone, tracks in the fresh snow leading toward the barn. She dressed quickly and prepared breakfast, watching anxiously out the window as the storm had left behind bitter cold. When he didn't return after an hour, she pulled on her coat and made her way through knee-deep drifts to the barn. She found him struggling with a heifer in labor, the animal clearly distressed. "What can I do?" she asked, pulling off her gloves. Lucas looked up, surprise evident. "You should go back to the house. It's messy work." "I'm not afraid of messy." She rolled up her sleeves. "Tell me how to help." For the next hour, they worked together to save both cow and calf, Vivian following Lucas's instructions without hesitation. When the newborn finally lay safely beside its exhausted mother, they both sat back against the barn wall, exhausted themselves. "You're remarkable," Lucas said, watching her with new appreciation. "Most women I know would have fainted at the sight." "I'm not most women," she echoed his earlier words, smiling despite her fatigue. "No," he agreed softly, "you certainly are not." They stayed until the calf was nursing properly, then trudged back to the cabin together. Inside, Lucas built up the fire while Vivian prepared hot coffee and breakfast. As they ate, she noticed him watching her with an intensity that hadn't been there before. "What is it?" she asked finally. "I've been thinking," he began, then hesitated. "This arrangement of ours, it's worked well, hasn't it?" "I believe so." "But it's not conventional," Vivian's heart quickened. "No, it isn't." Lucas set down his coffee cup, his expression serious. "People will talk when spring comes and we start going to town again." "Let them talk," she said with more confidence than she felt. "We know the truth." "Do we?" His voice had dropped lower. "I'm not sure I know anything anymore except that having you here has changed everything." Vivian's breath caught. "Changed how?" Lucas stood abruptly, moving to the window to stare out at the snow-covered landscape. "I told myself I was doing the right thing, the honorable thing, giving you a safe place without expectations." He turned to face her. "But I didn't account for this." "For what?" "For wanting more than our arrangement." His hands clenched at his sides. "For wanting a real marriage." Vivian rose slowly, afraid to hope. "Lucas." "I understand if you don't feel the same," he continued quickly. "You're free to stay as we are. But I needed you to know that somewhere along the way I fell in love with you, Vivian." She crossed the room to stand before him, heart pounding. "I thought you didn't want a wife." "I didn't think I deserved one," he corrected. "Not after everything I'd seen and done in the war. But you make me believe in better things again." Vivian reached up to touch his face, feeling the stubble beneath her fingertips. "I fell in love with you too. I've been trying not to, thinking you only wanted a housekeeper." His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. "I want a partner. A wife, someone to share this life with if you'll have me." "I already do have you," she whispered. "From the moment you paid your last coin for me." Lucas leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. "May I kiss you, Vivian, as a husband would kiss his wife?" In answer, she rose on tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with months of unspoken longing. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "We should make it official," Lucas said. "When the pass clears, we'll ride to the preacher in town." "Yes," she agreed, smiling through tears of joy. "Although in my heart I already consider myself your wife." That night, Vivian moved her belongings into Lucas's room, and they lay together talking until dawn, planning their future and sharing dreams long held silent. Spring arrived with renewed hope and purpose. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts, Lucas managing the cattle with Vivian now helping in the field as well as the home. They rode to town together on the first clear day, standing before the preacher to formalize what their hearts had already decided. The townspeople whispered, of course, but fell silent when they saw the obvious devotion between the couple. Even Tucker nodded respectfully when they passed his saloon, perhaps recognizing that his loss had been for the greater good. One evening in early summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lucas took Vivian's hand. "I have something to show you," he said, leading her to the barn. Inside, a beautiful sorrel mare whickered a greeting. "She's yours," Lucas explained. "Traded Johnson some carpentry work for her." Vivian stroked the horse's velvety nose. "She's beautiful, but what about your breeding stock? We should be saving for that." Lucas smiled, pulling her into his arms. "The ranch will grow in time. Right now, I'm more interested in another kind of family growth." Vivian blushed, thinking of their passionate nights together. "Are you now?" "I am," he kissed her tenderly. "Never thought I'd have this, a home, a wife, the chance for children." "All because you couldn't let me go to Tucker," she teased. Lucas grew serious. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you on that auction block. You were terrified but standing straight, eyes fixed on the distance like you could see something better coming." "I couldn't have imagined how much better," she whispered against his lips. A year to the day after the auction, Vivian gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Emma Rose Reed. Lucas sat beside the bed, cradling the infant with awe while Vivian watched, her heart overflowing with love for her small family. "I have something for you," Lucas said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small velvet pouch. "Had it made in town last month." Inside, Vivian found a gold locket similar to her mother's, but when she opened it, she found a miniature painting of Lucas on one side and empty space on the other. "For Emma," Lucas explained. "When she's older, so she'll always carry her family with her like you do." Tears spilled down Vivian's cheeks. "It's perfect." As their daughter grew, so did the ranch. Lucas's careful management and Vivian's shrewd business sense led to expansion, more cattle, better breeding stock, eventually hired hands to help with the increasing workload. Emma was joined by 2 brothers over the years, and the cabin expanded to accommodate their growing family. 10 years after that fateful auction, Lucas and Vivian stood on their porch watching their children play in the yard of what was now one of the most prosperous ranches in the territory. "Did you ever imagine this?" Vivian asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "That day in Vermilion Creek, did you ever think we'd have all this?" Lucas wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "I hoped," he admitted. "The moment I saw you, something told me you were worth every coin I had and more." "The best investment you ever made," she teased. "The only one that ever mattered," he corrected, pressing a kiss to her temple. As twilight painted the Wyoming sky in shades of purple and gold, they called their children in for supper. The family gathered around the table Lucas had built when Emma was born, now marked with years of meals, conversations, and life shared together. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Lucas took out his fiddle and played the same melody he'd first shared with Vivian during their first winter together. She sat beside him, mending one of the boys' shirts, occasionally glancing up to meet his eyes over the music. "Happy?" he asked when the song ended. Vivian set aside her sewing and moved to sit on his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Beyond anything I could have imagined that day on the auction block. Worth every penny," he murmured against her hair. "Every last coin," she agreed, kissing him with the same passion that had only deepened through the years of partnership, parenthood, and prosperity they'd built together. Outside, stars appeared one by one over Reed Ranch, where a terrified bride and a generous cowboy had found not just safety and shelter, but a love worth far more than gold.